Welcome to Ninerology, Faithful in the Trenches. I'm your host, Alan, and we're here to talk about all things 49ers, specifically Brandon Aiyuk in this episode. And what are the latest trade rumors? We know that last week the Jaguars inquired about Brandon Aiyuk, and it was rumored that the 49ers wanted their number 17 pick and Zay Jones, in which case the Jaguars were not interested in. And I would say kudos to the 49ers. You do not want to give up Brandon Aiyuk, who is homegrown, drafted, developed, and ultimately is getting better and better every single year. Now, we know that there are business decisions that need to be made. Eric Armstead was released because of certain cap things. Wasn't able to stay healthy. But Brandon Aiyuk is a guy that you want to pay. Now, more rumors came about this week with the Steelers being interested in Brandon Aiyuk, who's not vocal on social media, actually tweeting out at Coach Tomlin saying, "They're saying we're twins. What do you think?" Now, there's a lot of people thinking that this is Brandon Aiyuk potentially wanting to go play for the Steelers. But I think what's happening is he's taking a page out of the Deebo Samuel contract negotiating playbook. Because if we know, a couple years ago, when Deebo was up for his new deal, they're messy, much like most 49ers negotiations are. They like to drag those out until training camp and to see ultimately lowball the players until they finally come to an agreement. And I think Aiyuk doesn't want to play that game or take a page out of Deebo's book and see if that helps him to get paid sooner rather than later. We know that there were trade rumors with Deebo. He requested a trade, ultimately saying he didn't want to get traded. And that was one of the ways for him to get paid what he wanted to get paid and still stay in San Francisco. Now, this is the thing for the 49ers. You're on a very slippery slope here because, one, while Aiyuk does look like Mike Tomlin, you don't want him anywhere near the Steelers. You want to keep them here in San Francisco. And let's take a look at his numbers over the past 4 years. 2020, he had 60 receptions for 748 yards, averaged 12.5 yards per reception. 21, you get 56 catches. But guess what? The average went up to 14.8, 826 yards. And 2022 is when he finally broke 1,000. He had 1,015 yards receiving at 13 yards per reception. And then this past year, he really broke out with 1,342 yards, 17.9 was the average, 7 touchdowns. And so each year, he is breaking that next barrier. He is an up-and-coming receiver. Many say the Devontae Adams 2.0 just because of how crisp and clean his route running is. The 49ers don't have another clear wide receiver, pure wide receiver that can do that. Deebo Samuel is more of your wide back who can go ahead and he's going to be physical, run across the middle, but he's not going to have much separation like Brandon Aiyuk is. Now, Deebo, game changer, all those things, but you need somebody that can do what Aiyuk can only do. And so you got to pay the man. The question is, you can't just play this game that you've always played. Drag it out into training camp because what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for failure. More and more receivers need to get paid. We saw Calvin Ridley ended up getting paid. We see other receivers getting paid, and that's only going to drive up the cost for Brandon Aiyuk. Now, the question is, are the 49ers going to trade Aiyuk? I think what's going to happen is they need to decide whether they're going to pay him or not. And my guess is it's going to settle somewhere around the $25 million a year range. Now, if he's asking for 27 on up, my guess is he gets traded before the draft. But I can promise you this, if it goes out until training camp, other receivers are going to get paid, which is only going to drive up the cost for Aiyuk. Because you look at Calvin Ridley, he's getting $23 million a year. Aiyuk is younger than Ridley, and he's better than Ridley. So that is your baseline right there. You only need to go up. So $25 million is going to be probably the starter, and he's probably going to want some additional incentives. My guess is he's going to want to beat Deebo on that contract, maybe 26. But I'm assuming that 49ers and Parag and Lynch and company, 25 is probably, they don't want to probably exceed that. They know that they're going to have to end up paying Brock Purdy next year. They've already had a couple signings this year. Hargrave, they just restructured, so that guarantees you at least another 2 years of Hargrave. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for future years as far as keeping that premier talent here. So you need to lock up Aiyuk now while you can, because if you drag this out, you're only driving up the cost. It does not help you in any way, shape, or form. We know that Aiyuk had some issues being in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan when he first started, so I'm sure there's some bad blood there, just a little bit. Like, hey, I remember how you guys treated me then. If you do that again now, I am out of here. And so that's one thing. You do not want to break this up. If you end up letting Aiyuk go, what is that going to do for Brock Purdy and his growth? You do not want to stunt his growth because you take away his prime weapon last year. Think about this. Lock him up now. He's only going to get better because now Purdy's going to have an additional offseason where finally he's not healing from that UCL. He has a full offseason to even build a rapport even more with Aiyuk, with Debo, Juwan Jennings. And so what you got to do here is lock him up now. Forget about the Steelers. Forget about the Jaguars. Those rumors are going to continue. Lock him up. Take care of your stuff, John Lynch. And stop all these off-season rumors. Yes, we get it. It's good for business to be talking about the team during the off-season. But this is putting yourself in a very slippery slope. A place you do not want to be in the off-season. Where you're still recovering from the Super Bowl loss. Keep things in-house. Stay focused on this upcoming season. Take care of this contract sooner. Get out of your own way and lock up Brandon Aiyuk. This is a direct call out. Kyle Shanahan, get involved in this. Go to John Lynch's office and say, look, forget everything that we're typically used to doing. Let's get this man under contract, get him signed, give him a 5-year, $125 million deal, do something like that. Have him break the guarantees that Calvin Ridley had. Do all the incentives that you need to do, but you got to pay the man. Pay the man. Stop these rumors where they're at now. Stop them in their tracks. Focus on the draft instead of having to deal with all of this noise on the outside. You do that, it'll set up the team for success going into the offseason, going into training camp, going into OTAs, those things like that. Well, that's all we have for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Ninerology, and we'll catch you guys next time.